Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with yet another marvelous chamber music box. And this is of genuine historical interest. It is the Juilliard Quartet, the early Columbia recordings, 1949 to 1956. Now, these Juilliard boxes are getting a little bit complicated because, first of all, most people don't even remember who Columbia was. It's Sony now, and has been for several decades. And so the fact that they used to be Columbia or CBS is even more complicated than it needs to be. Then they've had several Juilliard boxes. There were the RCA recordings, and then there were the early Columbia, the Epic recordings, pardon me. Epic. Epic was Columbia's budget label. George Zell was on Epic. In other words, it was the label that had all the good stuff. I'm just kidding. But it was a division of Columbia, and there was a box of Epic recordings. And now we have the early Columbias. These are monos. And so, it's a little bit, for people to know what this is, I think is asking too much of today's audience, particularly since most of the people who do know what it was are probably near death. Sorry, folks, I know who my audience is out here. We're all getting closer. And if they're not near death, then they're not likely to understand why these things are important. Because the early Columbia recordings, like I said, they're all mono, but they sound fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. Introduced a tremendous amount of contemporary music. This was when the Juilliard Quartet was still a contemporary music specialty quartet. In a way. And so there's stuff here that you won't find anywhere else. I mean, it's just not available. It hasn't been recorded since. And that really is astonishing when you think about it. So this is a valuable set, beautifully remastered. And it has 16 CDs. And we're going to go through it. And as is typical with most of these Sony or Columbia reissues, what's nice about it is that they have included original couplings that may or may not be the Juilliard Quartet, which I think is really kind of cool because a lot of the niftiest stuff is not necessarily the Juilliard Quartet. For example, let's take a look at CD number 1. All the stuff is in the booklet here, so fortunately I don't have to pull everything out and whiz around with it. CD number 1, Darius Milhaud. Now, because these are original playing times, some of these things have very, very short, original couplings, have very short playing times. And you just have to put up with that. This is like a 30-minute CD. And if that bothers you, then hey, don't buy it. That's your solution. Vote with your wallet. It's Milhaud, the Cantata de l'Enfant et de la Mer. That is not la mer as in the ocean. It's the child and the mother, to a bunch of poems by Maurice Carême. Is that the guy? Sounds like that, at least if I could see this at all. It's close enough. It's for narrator and string quartet. And as you know, and piano, I detest things with narration. Hatred, deep, abiding hatred. Because all I want to do is listen to the music, and I want the narrator to shut up. The narrator in this case is Madeleine Milhaud, which of course gives the thing some historical authenticity. And so I don't mind. I like Madeleine Milhaud. I think she's kind of fun. So I have no problem with her in this particular case. And the pianist is Leonid Hambro with the Juilliard String Quartet, Darius Milhaud himself, conductor. And he's on hand for La Muse Ménagère, the household muse, for piano solo, which he plays by himself. In other words, it's really nice. And one of the things about Milhaud that you may have noticed as we've gone through a lot of these sets is that he pops up. He pops up on all kinds of other collections and in all kinds of odd places because he wrote so much music for every conceivable combination, and it's fun to listen to almost invariably. So you've got this guy who's written tons and tons of music, who was sort of always out there, and he was also in the U.S. And so, a lot of people figured, well, Milhaud's around. He's a nice guy. He plays his own stuff. Let's stick some Milhaud on our disc. And so you find bits of Milhaud, odds and ends, all over the place in the discography. And it's very hard to assemble any coherent picture of what he did because it's all over the place, quite literally all over the place. But here is one nice place, and it's an all Milhaud disc, and that's fine with me. Now, discs 2, 3, and 4. The Bartók string quartets, the mono Bartók cycle. Now, this set of Bartók quartets was a landmark in the history of recordings, because until this point, first of all, I don't think there was a complete set of the Bartók quartets that was regularly available, and second of all, they set an entirely new standard for technical proficiency and accuracy in the music, and they turned them into real landmarks of contemporary music, not just the work of a Hungarian ethnomusicologist, not just a local hero. They really established the international bona fides of this music for the first time, and they are marvelous performances. They've held up extremely well. Now, I don't have permission to actually play samples of this stuff, which makes me crazy. I mean, does Sony really think that if I play a couple of 30-second clips, they're going to lose lots of money from all the people who are just waiting to hear this stuff so they can somehow profit from it? I mean, So, because I don't have permission, I'm going to have to do my own version of the finale of the fourth quartet. Are you ready? Here it comes. How's that? Not bad, huh? You may think that that was just abominable and atrocious, and you wish that I would just shut up and never do such a thing. However, there is method to my madness, because I happen to have had access to some of the actual ethnomusicological recordings that Bartók made of his folk music researches throughout Hungary and Transylvania and all that stuff. And let me tell you, that stuff sounds even scarier than the finale of the fourth quartet. You are not going to believe what those people sound like. He's got some old guy with no voice, me for example, and a violin. And the guy is shrieking in some Hungarian dialect, and the violin is tuned in quarter tones, and it's just wailing away. And the two of them are going at it. And let me tell you, Bartók's own version is mild compared to the stuff that he recorded, or the thing I just sang. So there you go. It proves a point. I'm so pleased. Anyway, this is a fantastic Bartók set, and everyone needs to have it if you care about that music. Now, then we get, Alban Berg, the lyric suite, coupled with the Ravel F major. Now, the Juilliard did the Ravel quartet about 350 times. My favorite one, as I've said before, is the one in the RCA collection in luminous living stereo. But, I mean, it's a beautiful performance, and, what's not to love? I mean, does anyone ever really blow the Ravel quartet? I don't think so. All right, next. This is another fabulous disc. Aaron Copland, the sextet for clarinet, piano, and string quartet. Now, the sextet is actually the short symphony, which Copland arranged for chamber forces because it was too difficult to be performed by the forces of the day rhythmically. It's incredibly complicated, and no one was playing it. So he made a chamber version of it, and this is a wonderful performance. I love Copland's short symphony. I don't care what it's arranged for. It's a masterpiece, a fantastic piece of music. Copland thought so, and he was right. So this is great to have. And then we have Ellis Coe's, the chamber concerto for viola and string nonet, which is something by somebody you've never heard before and will likely never hear from again. But it was interesting. It was nice to hear. I enjoyed it. Then we get CD 7, William Schuman. William, the American guy, not Robert. I got to tell you another story. This is unbelievable. I was playing Mahler's Sixth Symphony at Symphony Space in Manhattan, and one of the double bass players, we were just chatting, and he told me he was at Juilliard, and at that point, William Schuman was still running Juilliard, or he had just left or just died. I mean, he was around there and whatnot. And we got to talking about his music, and I said that I never particularly cared for most of it. I never liked him. I didn't think his music was very interesting. And he just looked at me quizzically and said, "But wait a minute. Didn't he die a long time ago?" And I said, "No, William Schuman, he's still around, or he died 2 years ago, whatever it was." And he said, "Well, but what about his wife, Clara?" And I just looked at him and said, "So, you're a Juilliard double bass player, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, thank you. That's all I needed to know." So yes, it is William Schuman, not Robert. They even spell Schumann differently. This is Schumann with one N at the end, not Schumann, the German way. And this is his string quartet number 4, which I find as dry and unappealing as everything that William Schuman wrote for the most part. And it's coupled with Ingolf Dahl's Concerto a Tre for clarinet, violin, and cello by people who have absolutely nothing to do with the Juilliard Quartet. And that's actually far more interesting, I think, than the William Schuman Quartet number 4. Now, the next 3 discs, another epochal history of string quartetedness. The Schoenberg 4 string quartets. Extraordinary pieces. They really are. I think the Schoenberg quartets are just terrific. They are difficult. From number 3 on, they get rather difficult. Number 4 is they're gnarly. They're gnarly and they're atonal, and that's just life. You have to live with it. But hearing his progression and evolution in style, I think, is a remarkable thing. I think they're extremely important works. Like everything he wrote, they have exceptional integrity, which you can hear. I mean, like, for example, this bit of the 4th quartet. I mean, how can you not love that? I don't understand. I really don't. But these, like the Bartóks, these are landmark performances, superbly well done. And I will say, Uta Graf is the soprano in the 2nd quartet, and she's terrific. She really sings it well. It's a quartet with voice. It's very fine, fascinating work. And let me see what else you get something with it. Oh, yes, Anton Webern, the 5 movements for string quartet. And they sound completely different from Schoenberg. I mean, anybody who thinks atonal music is like all the same, or 12-tone music is all the same, should listen to the Schoenberg 4th quartet, or as much of it as you can take, and then some of the Webern 5 movements here, which are, of course, one is 44 seconds, and it just goes, very, totally different. So I think they're wonderful. And then the Alban Berg string quartet is on here too, which is just terrific. And these were the performances that put this music on the map and committed it to posterity, which was really important. And Schoenberg, by the way, he was alive when these things were done, and he gave these performances, the Juilliard performances of his music, his imprimatur. He said, "I really had no idea that that's what I was writing when I wrote it, but I approve of what you're doing," or words to that effect. I don't know. It's in the booklet here. Really astonishing. And then the rest of this, there are some other normal things, but the rest of this is part of the American music, the modern music series. And one thing I have to say about modern string quartet writing, for the most part, unless the composers were really good, I mean masters, geniuses, like Bartók or Schoenberg, for example, most modern string quartets sound either like Bartók or like Schoenberg, only less good. That's just the way it is. There are very few modern string quartets that I've heard that are, and I've heard a lot, that are really that extraordinarily individual. by modern composers. They're very serious because nobody writes a string quartet since Haydn and Beethoven without taking the job seriously. And that, I think, is part of the problem. I think that they are so serious that they don't reveal a lot of personality. And one of the things you really miss in hearing in most modern string quartets is just that feeling of joy, of uninhibited joy that you can, write into a string quartet. There's nothing wrong with being happy when you write a string quartet. It doesn't have to be dismal. So many of these pieces end with slow movements. I mean, it's like, yeah. But here they are. So let's talk about them. First, Leon Kirchner's String Quartet number 1, which sounds like Schoenberg, only less. And that's the American Art Quartet, and Irving Fine's String Quartet with the Juilliard String Quartet, which has a great deal of integrity, like everything Irving Fine wrote, whether it's dodecaphonic or not. He was a good solid composer. Peter Mennin, String Quartet number 2. Now, I like Peter Mennin. Peter Mennin was also the head of Juilliard for a while. I guess before William Schuman. I don't know what the order of succession was exactly. Yeah, he was earlier. And I like his symphonies very much. He was an American neoclassicist who evolved a very acerbic and contrapuntally busy and rhythmically charged style. I find it bracing. It's kind of like a good astringent after a shave. It gives you a little pucker there. And his second string quartet is like Bartók, only less. I actually knew his daughter vaguely. She's an attorney in New York, in case you were wondering. I don't know if she's still in New York, but when I knew her, she was an attorney at a major law firm in New York. And her name was Mennin. I said, oh, any relation to Peter Mennin? And she said, oh, yeah, he was my father. I said, well, there you go. Terrific. So anyway, and then the Andrew Imbrie String Quartet number 1, which sounds rather like Schoenberg, only less. And then we have Mozart, the Hofmeister Quartet, and the Prussian Quartet number 1, played with typical Juilliard clarity and leanness and taste and ability, and boy, do they sound out of place in this company, but there they are. And then we have Virgil Thompson, String Quartet number 2. Now there's a guy who could write some humor into music. That's a good thing. It's a fun quartet. It's with the Juilliard Quartet and William Schumann's Voyage, a cycle of 5 pieces for piano, played by Beveridge Webster, which actually sounds better than his string quartet music. I must say that. Then we have, Alexei Hayeff, H-A-I-E-F-F, String Quartet number 1, which ends with a lento. But that's only a coda. It's only a minute long, and until you get to that point, it's kind of like wrong note Ravel. If you can imagine such a thing. The music is gnarly, but congeals at nodal points with rather attractive textural and harmonic ideas. So that was fun to make the acquaintance of. That's with the Juilliard Quartet. And then you get Barber's Hermit songs with Leontine Price and Samuel Barber at the piano, the original Copland. And that, of course, is just a classic performance. That has nothing to do with the Juilliard String Quartet, and I don't care. I don't think you will either. And then let's see. Oh, we're already at number 16. We're already at the end. And they saved the best for last. Well, not the best, but these are good pieces. Lukas Foss, his String Quartet number 1, which is really a good piece. You can listen. You can tell from the first 30 seconds that this is going to be a good piece. Why? Because Foss had a real ear for texture. So much quartet writing, especially contemporary quartet writing, is just gray. It's just gray and contrapuntal. That's William Schuman, by the way. But not Lukas Foss. Whether it's tonal or not tonal, whatever he's doing, there's an ear-catching feeling for timbre that allows you to listen to it with pleasure. And then last is William Bergsma's String Quartet number 3. Now this ends with a 10-minute lento. Okay, yeah, it's really serious, and it has a lento at the end, a slow movement, a long slow movement. But it's a pleasure to listen to along the way. It's another one of those sort of quasi-neo-romantic, neoclassical American things with a rhythmically intricate and tricky and bouncy central fast movement. And I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it before I heard this. I don't remember ever having heard it before. and I'm going to listen to it again. Maybe several times. Bergsma is another composer who is worth looking into, I think. Really, really very interesting. So that, my friends, is the Juilliard String Quartet, the early Columbia recordings. Well mastered, mono, 16 discs, with a lot that is not the Juilliard String Quartet, but which is just as much worth hearing as the stuff that is the Juilliard String Quartet. Could they have stuffed it all onto maybe 2/3 as many CDs? Yes, they could have. But you got original covers, original jackets, which, by the way, were absolutely hideous. I mean, let me just I mean, this was supposed to be attractive. I mean, this stuff was just terrible. I mean, okay, yeah, a lot of it was like the modern stuff, was like modern art. I mean, this is sideways, but you'd never know, and it doesn't matter. And like here's Schoenberg, there he is. It's lots of blotches and blobs and flaky things. But even Mozart, Mozart, go figure. I do love also this one. Here's Lukas Foss on the front, and when you turn it around, there's this wonderful, wonderful picture of who would I assume is William Bergsma. I mean, it could be the other way around. No, this is Bergsma with the crooked bow tie, which makes me feel so much better about the way I dress, I gotta tell you. And, he allowed this to go public. It shows also a guy who had at least a little bit of a sense of humor, I think. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.